The black orphan girl hung from the cottonwood tree like a broken doll, the crude sign below her feet reading "Indian Land" in jagged letters. Vultures circled overhead in the merciless Texas sun. Her small body swayed with the wind, rope burns, marking her dark wrists where rough hands had bound her. Tashawicka pulled his horse to a halt beneath the shade of mesquite brush. He had been tracking stolen horses for 3 days, following hoofprints that led him deeper into disputed territory. The sight before him made his jaw clench. Fresh, army boot prints surrounded the base of the tree like a ceremonial circle. This was no random act of frontier justice. The girl's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Still alive. His hand moved to the bone handle of his knife. Saving her would bring questions. Questions brought soldiers. Soldiers brought death to his people. The fragile peace his grandmother had worked so hard to maintain would shatter like creek ice under spring sun. But his warrior's code burned deeper than political calculations. No child should die alone under the watching eyes of carrion birds. He cut her down. The girl's eyes snapped open as her feet touched earth. Terror flooded her face when she saw him. She scrambled backward, clutching a leather satchel against her chest with desperate fingers. Words poured from her mouth in rapid English, most of which he understood but pretended not to. "Please don't hurt me. I ain't done nothing. They said Indians did it, but I never believed them stories about savages." Tashawicka studied her face. 12 years old, maybe 13. High cheekbones and intelligent eyes that reminded him of his lost sister. The girl wore a torn blue dress that had once been fine, now stained with dust and fear. Her hair was braided with ribbons that someone had tied with love. "Where are your people?" he asked in careful English. "Dead." The word came out flat as hammered metal, all of them. The missionaries, the wagon master, even old Mrs. Henderson who sang hymns every morning. She pointed toward a grove of cottonwoods where abandoned wagons sat like broken teeth against the horizon. Tashawicka had seen the wreckage on his way here, but hadn't investigated. Now he wished he had. Who did this? Indians with painted faces. At least that's what the soldier said before he strung me up. Tashawicka's blood went cold. He had seen those wagon wheels from a distance, noticed the arrows jutting from the wooden sides. Apache arrows. His people were being blamed for Apache raids again. The distant thunder of hoofbeats rolled across the prairie. At least 6 horses, moving fast. Tashawicka grabbed the girl's arm and pulled her toward his mount. "We go now." "I can't. I gotta get to Fort Griffin. This letter." She clutched the satchel tighter. "My mama said it was important. Fort Griffin is death for you now." The riders crested the hill like dark angels. Tashawicka could see the glint of army brass on their uniforms. He lifted the girl onto his horse and swung up behind her. Her small body trembled against his chest as they rode hard toward the broken country where rocks and ravines could hide them. Behind them, shouts echoed across the prairie. The pursuit had begun. Tashawicka guided his horse through a maze of sandstone formations his grandfather had shown him as a boy. These rocks held secrets older than the white man's war against his people, older than the Spanish, older than memory itself. The girl said nothing during their flight, but her grip on the satchel never loosened. Whatever she carried was worth dying for. That made it dangerous for everyone who helped her. They reached the hidden cave as the sun touched the western mountains. Tashawicka had used this place before when army patrols came too close to his people's winter camp. Water seeped from the rock walls, and the entrance was screened by thick brush. "This is safe," he told her. The girl slid down from the horse and immediately pressed herself against the cave wall. Her eyes tracked his every movement like a cornered animal. The rope burns on her wrists were deep, angry red against her dark skin. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Fear had carved lines around her eyes that no child should wear. Tashawicka had seen that look before, on his Sisters faced the night before the cavalry came. The night before everything ended. He gathered dry grass and built a small fire near the cave mouth. The smoke would dissipate in the brush, invisible to anyone more than 100 yards away. From his travel pack, he pulled strips of dried meat and a small clay pot of healing salve his grandmother had made. "What is your name?" "Zara May Washington." She watched him prepare the medicine. "You speak English real good for an Indian. Missionaries came to our people when I was young. Before the wars got bad. Were you there when they killed them missionaries today?" Tashawicka looked up from his work. "My people did not kill those missionaries." "Then who did?" "Apache. I saw the arrows in your wagons." "Apache make different points than Comanche. Different fletching on the shafts." Zara May's forehead wrinkled. "But why would someone say it was Comanche if it wasn't? Someone wants my people to take the blame. Someone who benefits from war between Comanche and the white settlements." The girl was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her satchel and pulled out a sealed letter. The envelope was addressed in careful script, "Major J. Whitfield, Fort Griffin, Texas. This was my mama's. She told me to guard it with my life if anything happened to her. Said it was about bad soldiers doing bad things." Tashawicka felt ice form in his stomach. Major Whitfield was the man who had been requesting more federal troops to fight the Comanche threat. The same man who had been issuing bounties for Comanche scalps. "Your mother, what happened to her?" "Fever took her 2 weeks back. The missionaries said they'd get me safe to California, but—" Zara May's voice cracked. "Ain't nothing safe anymore." Outside the cave, night sounds began there. Ancient chorus, coyotes calling to the moon, waned through the canyon walls. The soft footfalls of hunters and hunted in the eternal dance of survival. "You said a soldier put the rope around your neck." "Yes, sir. Big man with yellow hair on his face. Said I was a message to the savages about what happens when they cross into civilized territory." "What did he look like?" "Tall, scar on his left cheek shaped like a crescent moon. Eyes like winter water." Tashawicka knew that face. Captain Morrison, Major Whitfield's right hand. The man who had led the raid that killed his sister. Everything was connected. The Apache raids, the blamed Comanche, the dead missionaries, and this brave girl who carried secrets that could destroy powerful men. The fire crackled lower as full darkness settled over the canyon. Zara May had wrapped herself in the blanket he'd given her, but her eyes remained watchful. She trusted him enough to accept help, but not enough to sleep. "Why did you save me?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Tashawicka stared into the flames, seeing faces of the dead dancing in the orange light. His sister, his father. Good people who had died because other people chose hatred over understanding. Because no child should die alone, even a black child, even any child. Zara May nodded slowly. "My papa used to say there was good and bad in every kind of people. Said the trick was learning to tell the difference. Your father was wise. He was a buffalo soldier. Fought in the Indian wars before I was born." She looked at him with new curiosity. "Maybe he fought your people. Maybe war makes enemies of people who might have been friends. And what are we now?" Tashawicka added another piece of wood to the fire. "I don't know yet." But he was beginning to understand that this girl might be the key to saving both their peoples from a war that would destroy everything they held dear. The letter in her satchel could be the weapon they needed to fight back against the men who profited from blood and suffering. The question was whether they could stay alive long enough to use it. Dawn crept through the cave mouth like a reluctant witness. Zara May had slept fitfully, her small fingers never releasing their grip on the leather satchel. Tashawicka had kept watch, listening to the canyon's whispered warnings carried on the morning wind. The rope burns on her wrists looked better in daylight. Still angry, but clean. She watched him examine the wounds with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "You done this before," she said. "Too many times." He mixed fresh salve with water from the seeping rock walls. The medicine smelled of sage and something else she couldn't name. Her mother had used different herbs, but the gentleness in his hands was the same. "My mama was a teacher," Zara May said suddenly. "Taught reading and numbers to freed folks. In Arkansas. Said knowledge was the one thing nobody could take from you once you had it." Tashawika applied the salve with careful fingers. "What happened to her?" "Fever. Started after we crossed into Texas. Got worse every day until—" Zara May's voice caught. "The missionaries said they'd see me safe to California. Said there was a school there that needed teachers who looked like me." The wind shifted, bringing the scent of distant smoke. Tashawika's head snapped up. Campfires, multiple fires, which meant search parties were spreading across the territory. "Tell me about the letter," he said. Zara May's grip tightened on the satchel. "Mama never told me what was in it. Just said if anything happened to her, I was to get it to the army commander at Fort Griffin. Said it was about soldiers doing bad things to good people." "When did she write it?" "Been carrying it for months, maybe longer. She'd take it out sometimes and read it, then put it back. Always looked scared after." Toshawika understood that kind of fear. The fear of knowing too much about powerful people who killed to keep their secrets. He had seen it in his father's eyes before the soldiers came to their winter camp 2 years ago. "My father was a Buffalo soldier," Zara May continued. "Died fighting Apache down in Arizona Territory. Mama said he was a good man trying to do right in a world that didn't make it easy. Fighting my people's enemies. Maybe, or maybe just fighting because that's what soldiers do." The smoke smell grew stronger. Tashawika moved to the cave mouth and peered through the brush screen. In the distance, dust clouds marked the movement of multiple riders. They were searching systematically, like hunters who knew their prey was wounded. "We need to move," he said. "Where?" "My people's winter camp. It's the only safe place left." Zara May's eyes widened. "They'll kill me. Some might want to. But my grandmother leads the council. She'll listen to reason." "What reason? I'm a stranger." "A black stranger who brings soldiers to their door." Tashawika turned from the cave mouth. The girl sat perfectly still, but her breathing had quickened. Fear carved lines around her eyes that made her look older than her years. "My sister was your age when the cavalry came," he said quietly. "She had the same look in her eyes that you do now. The look of someone who's seen too much death. What happened to her?" "She died protecting the younger children. Stood between them and the soldiers' guns until the bullets found her." The canyon walls seemed to absorb the weight of his words. Zara May loosened her grip on the satchel for the first time since he'd found her. "I'm sorry." She was brave. Braver than grown warriors. "You have that same courage." "I don't feel brave. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right when fear tells you to run." The sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed off the rocks, closer now. Tashawika gathered his few possessions and helped Zara May to her feet. She moved stiffly, her body still healing from the rope's damage. They led his horse deeper into the canyon, following paths that only the Comanche knew. The rock walls rose on either side like ancient guardians, their surfaces carved by wind and time into shapes that resembled sleeping giants. "Your grandmother," Zara May said as they walked. "Will she really listen? Nadua has lived through 3 wars. She's seen what happens when people stop listening to each other." "And if she says no?" Tashawika didn't answer. He couldn't. Tell her that his grandmother's protection was the only thing standing between Zara May and a very short life. The letter in her satchel made her valuable to some people and deadly dangerous to others. They reached the canyon's far end by midday. The winter camp lay hidden in a valley beyond the rim, protected by natural barriers and generations of careful secrecy. Smoke from cooking fires rose thin and straight in the still air. "Remember," Tashawika said. "Show respect but not submission. My people value courage over courtesy." "What do I call your grandmother?" "Nadua." "It means someone found. She was taken by our people as a child and chose to stay when offered the chance to return to her birth family." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. A white woman who had chosen to live Comanche might be the only person who could save a black girl from white man's justice. They descended into the valley as the sun reached its highest point. Children spotted them first, their voices carrying across the camp in excited chatter. Adults emerged from their winter shelters, hands moving to weapons when they saw the stranger. Nadua stepped from the largest lodge. She was smaller than Zara May had expected, her gray hair braided with strips of colored leather. Her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had survived by reading people's hearts. "Grandmother," Tashawika said in Comanche, "I bring one who needs our protection." Nadua studied Zara May for a long moment. The girl stood straight despite her exhaustion, meeting the older woman's gaze without flinching. The satchel remained clutched against her chest. "She brings danger," Nadua said in English, surprising Zara May. "I can smell it on her." "She also brings truth," Tashawika replied. "Truth about the raids that have been blamed on our people." A warrior stepped forward from the gathering crowd. Katsuteka was Tashawika's age, but broader through the shoulders, his face marked by old battle scars. His eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had learned to suspect everyone. "You bring the enemy to our fire," he said. "I bring a child who is left to die. A child who leads soldiers to our door." The tension in the camp was thick as smoke. Zara May could feel the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, measuring her worth against the risk she represented. Some faces showed curiosity, others suspicion. A few held outright hostility. "What do you carry?" Nadua asked, pointing to the satchel. Zara May's fingers tightened reflexively. "Papers, my mama's papers." "What kind of papers?" "I don't know. She never told me. Said they were about soldiers doing bad things." Nadua and Tashawika exchanged glances. In that moment of silent communication, Zara May glimpsed a depth of understanding between them. These people had their own language of survival, their own ways of recognizing truth. "Show me," Nadua said. Zara May's hands trembled as she opened the satchel. Inside were her mother's teaching materials, a small Bible, and the sealed letter addressed to Major Whitfield. She handed the letter to Nadua with reluctant fingers. The old woman examined the envelope without opening it. Her expression grew troubled as she read the address. "This name," she said. "I know this name." "Major Whitfield," Tashawika said. "The one who requests more soldiers to fight the Comanche threat. The one who pays bounties for our scalps," Katsuteka added bitterly. Nadua handed the letter back to Zara May. "Your mother was wise to fear this knowledge. Men have died for less. Will you help me? That depends on what help you need." Zara May straightened her shoulders. "I need to get this letter to someone who can stop the killing. Someone who cares more about justice than politics. And if no such person exists, then I'll keep trying until I find one. Or until they kill me for trying." Nadua smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. "You have the heart of a warrior, child. Very well. You may stay until we decide what to do with this dangerous knowledge of yours." The camp slowly returned to its daily rhythms, but Zara May could feel the undercurrent of tension. She had been granted sanctuary, but she was not yet trusted. That would have to be earned through time and careful action. As the sun set over the valley, she sat beside Tashawika at the communal fire. The familiar sounds of children playing and adults talking reminded her of the freed folks community back in Arkansas. Different languages, different customs, but the same fundamental need for safety and belonging. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait, and while we wait, we learn about each other." "And if the soldiers find us?" Tashawika stared into the flames. "Then we discover what we're really made of." The winter camp held its breath around Zara May. 3 days had passed since her arrival, and the careful dance of acceptance had begun. She moved through the daily routines with quiet determination, helping where she could, watching everything with the sharp eyes of someone who had learned survival through observation. Children gathered around her on the second morning. Their curiosity overcame their parents' caution when they saw her working with numbers, scratching calculations in the dirt outside Nadua's lodge. The grain storage problem had been troubling the elders. Not enough food for the long winter ahead, and no clear understanding of how to stretch what they had. Zara May spread the preserved corn on woven mats, counting in groups of 10. Her mother's teaching methods came back to her hands like muscle memory. The children watched as she showed them how to mark quantities with stick figures, how to divide totals by the number of people in the camp. 63 people, she said to Nadua, who had come to observe. "If we portion the corn at 3 handfuls per person per day, you'll run short by 2 weeks. And if we portion at 2 handfuls, you'll have enough until the spring hunt, with some left over for trade." The old woman nodded slowly. "My grandson chose well when he brought you here, but not everyone agreed." Katsuteka watched from across the camp, his scarred face unreadable. He had spoken little since her arrival, but his presence felt heavy with unspoken objections. Other warriors gathered around him when they thought she wasn't looking, their voices low and urgent. "He thinks I'm a spy," Zara May said to Tashawika as they worked together preparing kindling. "Katsuteka thinks everyone is a spy. The cavalry killed his first wife during a peace negotiation. Trust doesn't come easily to him anymore. Can't say I blame him, but you're still here. Where else would I go?" The question hung between them like morning mist. Zara May had nowhere else to run, and they both knew it. The letter in her satchel had made her valuable to some people and dangerous to others. Neither category offered much hope for a long life. On the 4th day, she began teaching the children to read. It started with one curious boy who had seen her marking symbols in the dirt. Soon others joined, drawn by the magic of making marks that held meaning. Their mothers watched from a distance, uncertain but not hostile. "These letters," she explained, drawing in the smooth earth. "They're sounds. Put the sounds together, and they make words. Put the words together, and they tell stories." An older girl traced the letters with her finger. "What story do these words tell?" "That depends on who's reading them. Same letters can mean different things to different people." Tashawika squatted beside them, watching the lesson unfold. "Show them their names." Zara May looked up at him. "I don't know their names." "Then learn them." The exchange of names became a ritual. Each child would say their name in Comanche, then watch as Zara May struggled to write the sounds using her letters. They giggled at her pronunciation, but patiently corrected her until she got it right. In return, she taught them to write simple English words: sky, earth, water, fire, the fundamental elements that connected all people regardless of language or tribe. "Why do white people think these marks on paper are so important?" asked the boy who had first approached her. "Because they help us remember things, and they help us talk to people who aren't here." "Talk to people who aren't here?" Zara May pulled out her mother's Bible, its leather cover worn smooth by countless hands. "My mama wrote notes in this book. When I read them, I can hear her. Voice in my head, she's not here anymore, but her words are." The children fell silent. Death was familiar to them, but the idea of preserving voices beyond death held a different kind of power. That evening, Nadua called Zara May to her lodge. The old woman sat beside a small fire, working on a pair of winter moccasins with careful stitches. Her hands moved with the practiced rhythm of someone who had made thousands of such items. You're teaching our children white man's writing. I'm teaching them to write their own names. Is there a difference? Zara May considered the question. I think so. Writing is just a tool. What matters is who's using it and why. Some of my people think you're trying to make our children into white children. No, ma'am. I'm trying to give them another way to preserve their stories. Your language, your history, your ways of seeing the world. All of it could be written down so it won't be lost. Nadua's hands stilled on the moccasins. Lost? My mama used to say that when the last person who remembers something dies, that thing dies too. Unless it's been written down somewhere. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the camp settled into its evening quiet. Children's voices drifted from the family lodges, speaking the mixture of Comanche and English that was becoming their shared language. Your letter, Nadua said finally. Have you thought about what it might contain? Every day. And I'm scared to find out, but I'm more scared of not finding out. Why? Zara May met the old woman's eyes. Because people died for this. Knowledge. If I don't use it to stop the killing, then their deaths meant nothing. That's a heavy burden for someone so young. Age doesn't make burdens lighter. Just makes you stronger for carrying them. Nadua smiled. You sound like your mother. I hope so. The next morning brought riders on the ridge. Tashawicka spotted them first, their silhouettes black against the dawn sky. He counted at least a dozen, moving with the careful precision of experienced trackers. Cavalry. Zara May asked. Bounty hunters, worse than cavalry. They get paid for results, not following orders. The camp mobilized with quiet. Efficiency. Children were moved to the center lodges. Warriors took positions along the valley's rim. Nadua organized the women and elders into defensive groups, each with assigned tasks and escape routes. They're not coming down, Tashawicka observed. Just watching. For how long? Until they decide we're not worth the fight. Or until they decide we are. Katsoteka approached them, his war paint already applied. This is what comes of harboring spies. She's not a spy, Tashawicka said. Then why are armed white men sitting on our doorstep? Because powerful people want her dead. Same reason they want us dead. All the more reason to send her away. Send her where? To those men on the ridge? Katsoteka's hand moved to his tomahawk. If that's what it takes to protect our people. Our people don't survive by sacrificing children to white man's anger. Our people don't survive by collecting white man's enemies either. The argument might have escalated, but Nadua's voice cut through the tension. Enough, both of you. She stood between them, small but commanding. Katsoteka, you speak from fear. Tashawicka, you speak from guilt. Neither emotion makes for good decisions. Then what do you suggest, grandmother? Katsoteka asked. We wait. And while we wait, we learn more about why these men want the girl so badly. Nadua turned to Zara May. Child, it's time to open that letter. Zara May's hands trembled as she reached for the satchel. The leather envelope felt heavier than it should, weighted with secrets that had already cost too many lives. The seal broke easily under her fingers, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Inside were 3 pages of careful handwriting and a small photograph. Zara May read the first page, her face growing pale. She handed it to Nadua without speaking. The old woman read silently, her expression darkening with each line. When she finished, she looked up at the riders on the ridge with new understanding. What does it say? Tashawicka asked. It says Major Whitfield has been selling army weapons to Apache raiders, using them to attack wagon trains and settlements, then blaming the attacks on Comanche to justify his requests for more federal troops and funding. How does your mother know this? Zara May's voice was barely a whisper. Because my father was the one who discovered it. He was going to report it to the territorial governor when he died. Mama said it was fever, but She couldn't finish the sentence. The truth sat heavy in the air between them. "But you think he was murdered," Nedua said gently. "I think a lot of good people have been murdered to keep this secret." The riders on the ridge began to move, spreading out along the valley's rim. Whatever patience they'd possessed was running out. The camp felt the shift in mood, the subtle tightening of nerves that preceded action. "How many people know about this letter?" Katsuteka asked. "Just us, and Major Whitfield." "Then we have something he wants. Something worth negotiating with." "You can't negotiate with men who profit from war," Tachawika said. "They'll promise anything to get what they want, then kill us all to keep their secret." "Then what do?" "You suggest? We get this information to someone who can use it, someone with more authority than a corrupt major." "And who would that be?" Tachawika looked at Zara May, then at his grandmother. "The territorial governor, the federal marshals. Someone who cares more about justice than politics. And if no such person exists, then we make sure this information survives even if we don't." The riders on the ridge had completed their circle. The camp was surrounded, but not yet under attack. A tense standoff had begun, with both sides waiting for the other to make the first move. Nedua folded the letter carefully and handed it back to Zara May. "Guard this with your life, child. But remember that some things are worth more than life." "Like what?" "Like the truth. And the hope that someday, truth will be stronger than fear." The standoff stretched into its second day. The bounty hunters remained on the ridge, patient as carrion birds. Their presence changed everything in the camp. Children stayed close to their mothers. Warriors slept with weapons beside them. Every sound carried the weight of potential danger. Zara May found herself watching Katsuteka more carefully. The scarred warrior had grown quieter since the letter's revelation, his eyes carrying a burden she couldn't name. He would disappear for hours at a time, returning with reports about the rider's movements that seemed too detailed for simple observation. "Where does he go?" she asked Tachawika as they worked together mending winter gear, scouting, making sure they don't try to come down the back trail. "Alone?" "Katsuteka works better alone." But something in Tachawika's voice suggested uncertainty. He watched his childhood rival with the same careful attention Zara May had noticed, as if reading signs in a language she didn't understand. The third night brought unexpected visitors. Katsuteka returned after sunset with 2 Apache warriors, their faces painted for war. The entire camp tensed at their approach, hands moving to weapons with practiced instinct. "Peace," Katsuteka called out. "They come under the white flag." The Apache leader was a man of middle years, his face marked by old battle scars. He spoke in careful English, his words chosen with diplomatic precision. "I am Mangas. My people have been blamed for many things we did not do. The white soldiers say we raid the wagon trains. They say we kill the settlers. But we have been in the mountains, hunting deer and preparing for winter." Nedua stepped forward. "What do you want?" "From us?" "Truth, the same truth that lives in the letter the young woman carries." Every eye in the camp turned to Zara May. She clutched the satchel closer, feeling the weight of too many secrets pressing down on her shoulders. "How do you know about the letter?" Tachawika asked. "Because my people have been watching Major Whitfield too. We know about the weapons he sells. We know about the men who dress as Apache to attack the wagons. We know about the lies he tells to justify his war." Mangas pulled a small bundle from his pack. Inside were Apache arrows, but they had been made by white hands. The fletching was wrong, the points shaped in ways no Apache would use. "We found these near the destroyed wagons. Someone wants your people in mind to fight each other while the real enemy grows rich from our blood." The revelation hit the camp like a physical blow. Katsuteka's hand moved to his tomahawk. But his anger was directed at something beyond the immediate circle. "Show them the rest," he said quietly. Mangas unwrapped a second bundle. Inside were U.S. Army uniforms, torn and bloodied. But the blood was old, and the tears looked deliberate. Major Whitfield's men dress as Apache to attack the wagons. Then they dress as cavalry to discover the attacks. They blame us for the killing and your people for harboring the killers. Why tell us this? Nadua asked. Because the letter in that girl's hands contains the names of everyone involved, including the territorial officials who have been helping Whitfield cover his tracks. Zara May felt the blood drain from her face. How do you know what's in the letter? Because we've been watching you since you arrived. Katsoteka has been meeting with us, trying to find a way to expose the truth without starting a war. The admission hit Tashawika like a physical blow. He turned to face his childhood rival, betrayal written across his features. You've been spying on us. I've been protecting us, Katsoteka replied. From a war that would destroy both our peoples. By consorting with our enemies? By learning who our real enemies are. Manga stepped between them before the argument could escalate. We are not enemies. We are both victims of the same deception. He pulled out a map marked with red dots. These are the locations of every Apache raid in the past year. Notice how they form a pattern around the richest mineral deposits in the territory. Major Whitfield isn't just stealing weapons. He's using the raids to clear the land for his mining operations. Zara May studied the map, her mathematical mind picking out the connections. He's not just profiting from war. He's using war to steal land. And when the tribes are all dead or relocated, he'll have access to gold and silver worth millions of dollars. The camp fell silent as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't just about corrupt soldiers or stolen weapons. It was about the systematic destruction of entire peoples for the sake of mineral wealth. What do you propose? Nadua asked. An alliance. Your people and mine, working together to expose the truth before Whitfield can complete his plan. And if we refuse, then we all die separately instead of surviving together. Tashawika looked at Zara May, then at his grandmother. The weight of decision pressed down on the camp like gathering storm clouds. There's more, Katsuteka said quietly. Show them the rest. Mangas pulled out a final item from his pack. It was a military dispatch, official and sealed. The paper was marked with the territorial governor's seal. This was intercepted from a courier yesterday. Major Whitfield has convinced the governor that both tribes are planning a coordinated attack on Fort Griffin. Federal troops are being mobilized from 3 different posts. How many troops? Tashawika asked. Enough to wipe out every Indian in the territory. The silence that followed was deafening. Children pressed closer to their mothers. Warriors fingered their weapons with new urgency. The game had changed from survival to potential extinction. When? Nadua asked. The attack is planned for the winter solstice, 6 days from now. Why then? Because Whitfield has convinced the governor that the tribes always attack during the longest night. He's using white superstition about Indian traditions to justify a massacre. Zara May's mind raced through the implications. He's not just going to kill the warriors. He's going to kill everyone, women, children, elders, everyone who might someday seek justice for what he's done. And after? After, he'll be a hero who avenged the massacre of innocent settlers. The territorial governor will probably give him a medal and a promotion. The cruel efficiency of the plan was breathtaking. Whitfield had engineered a situation where his victims would be blamed for their own deaths, and he would be celebrated for murdering them. The letter, Mangas said. Does it contain enough evidence to stop this? Zara May pulled out the pages her mother had died protecting. She read through them again, seeing new connections in light of what they'd learned. It has the names of everyone involved, bank records showing the weapon sales, testimony from soldiers who were ordered to participate, and a list of the mineral deposits Whitfield is trying to access. Is it enough? It's enough to convict him. But only if we can get it to someone who isn't part of the conspiracy. The federal marshals? According to this, 2 of them are on Whitfield's payroll. The territorial governor? He's been receiving reports from Whitfield for months. He either knows about the conspiracy or he's too compromised to act against it. The hopelessness of their situation settled over the camp like winter fog. They had the evidence to expose the truth, but no one with the power and integrity to act on it. There is another way, Tashawicka said slowly. What? We don't try to convince officials in private. We expose the truth in public, where it can't be hidden or ignored. How? The winter solstice ceremony in town. Half the territory will be there, including newspaper reporters and federal officials. If we can present the evidence publicly, in front of witnesses who can't be silenced or bribed. Mangas nodded slowly. It's dangerous. We'd have to get into the heart of enemy territory. Less dangerous than waiting here for them to come kill us. And if we fail, then we die trying to tell the truth instead of dying in silence. The plan was desperate, but it was the only option that offered any hope of survival. They would have to trust each other completely, and trust that somewhere in the crowd of settlers and officials, there would be people who cared more about justice than profit. I'll go, Zarame said. It's too dangerous, Tashawicka protested. I'm the only one who can read the letter in English. I'm the only one who can explain what it means to white audiences. You're also the one they want dead most of all. Then I better make sure my death serves a purpose. The decision was made. In 6 days, they would ride into the teeth of the enemy's trap and gamble everything on the slim hope that truth could triumph over greed. But first, they had to survive the bounty hunters on the ridge, who had grown tired of waiting and were beginning to move down into the valley. The bounty hunters descended at dawn, their horses picking careful paths down the valley walls. 12 men armed with rifles and the cold patience of professional killers. They moved without haste, knowing their prey had nowhere to run. Tashawicka watched from behind a boulder, counting weapons and measuring distances. The lead rider wore a star on his vest, but the badge meant nothing out here. These men answered to whoever paid them, and Major Whitfield paid well. How? Long, Zarame whispered beside him. 20 minutes before they reached the camp. Long enough? Has to be. The plan was simple in its desperation. Mangas and his warriors would create a distraction on the eastern approach while the women and children escaped through the hidden canyon passage. Tashawicka and Kotsoteka would hold the central position long enough for everyone to clear the valley, but plans had a way of crumbling when the shooting started. The first shots came from the ridge, not the valley floor. More bounty hunters, positioned to cut off any retreat. The trap was more complete than they'd realized. They've been watching us for days, Kotsoteka said grimly. They know about the back passage. Then we make our own passage. Tashawicka's words carried the weight of final decisions, the kind of choices that defined a man's life in the moments before it ended. The camp evacuated with the swift efficiency of people who had practiced this dance before. Children were bundled onto horses with their mothers. Elders gathered their most precious possessions and prepared to abandon everything else. Warriors took positions that would buy time with their lives. Zarame found herself mounted behind Nadua, the old woman's hands steady on the reins despite the chaos surrounding them. The leather satchel pressed against her chest, its contents suddenly feeling heavier than lead. Where are we going? She asked. To the sacred caves. They won't follow us there. Why not? Because they know what happened to the last white men who desecrated those places. The shooting intensified as they rode deeper into the canyon. Echoes bounced off rock walls, making it impossible to tell how many guns were firing or from which direction. The sound was a constant thunder that seemed to come from the earth itself. They reached the caves as the sun climbed toward its zenith. Ancient paintings covered the walls, telling stories in symbols that predated any written language. This was where the Comanche had hidden their most sacred objects during the worst of the cavalry raids. How many made it out? Zara May asked. Nadua counted the huddled figures in the cave mouth. Most of the children, half the women, few of the men. Tachawicca? I don't know. The uncertainty was worse than bad news. At least with death came the possibility of mourning. With uncertainty came only the endless weight of waiting. A rider approached the cave entrance. Mangus, his war paint streaked with sweat and dust. His horse bore the marks of hard travel, foam around its mouth and shallow cuts on its flanks. They've taken prisoners, he reported. Who? Tashawicca. Katsoteka, 3 others. The news hit the cave like a physical blow. Zara May felt her chest tighten with something that might have been grief or might have been rage. The distinction no longer mattered. Where? The old trading post. 5 miles south. What do they want? They sent a message. Your life for theirs. The words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Everyone in the cave understood the mathematics of the situation. 5 lives against 1. The choice seemed obvious to everyone except the one person who would have to make it. I'll go, Zara May said. No, Nadua replied firmly. You'll die, and they'll kill the prisoners anyway. Then what do you suggest? We wait for nightfall. Then we take them back. With what? Half our warriors are dead or captured. With the truth. It's the only weapon we have left. Mangas pulled a folded paper from his pack. This might change things. We intercepted another courier this morning. The message was addressed to the territorial governor, marked urgent and confidential. Nadua read it aloud, her voice growing harder with each word. Major Whitfield reports successful elimination of hostile Indian forces. Requests immediate deployment of federal troops to secure mineral rights in cleared territories. Estimates. Total mineral wealth at $2 million. He's already claiming victory, Zara May said. More than that. He's already claiming the land. The full scope of Whitfield's deception was becoming clear. The attack on the camp wasn't about capturing prisoners or recovering stolen property. It was about creating a massacre that would justify seizing the richest mineral deposits in the territory. The prisoners, Mangas continued, they're not being held for ransom. They're being held as witnesses. Witnesses to what? To their own confession. Whitfield plans to torture them until they admit to attacking the wagon trains. Then he'll hang them publicly as proof that justice has been served. The cave fell silent. Everyone understood what torture meant in the context of men who had already decided their prisoners would die regardless of what they said. How long do we have? The hanging is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Part of the winter solstice celebration. That's when we were planning to expose the truth anyway. Now we have to do both. Save the prisoners and expose the conspiracy. With what army? Mangas smiled grimly. With the army of people who've been lied to. Settlers, soldiers, officials who don't know they're part of a conspiracy. You think they'll listen? I think they'll listen to her. He pointed at Zara May, a young girl who survived everything Whitfield could throw at her. Someone who represents everything decent people are supposed to protect. The plan took shape in the dying light of day. They would infiltrate the winter solstice celebration, not as warriors seeking battle, but as truth-tellers seeking justice. Zara May would present the evidence while Mangas and the remaining warriors created enough confusion to free the prisoners. It was still desperate. It was still likely to fail. But it was the only option that offered any hope of survival for both the prisoners and the truth they carried. There's something else, Mangas said quietly. Something you need to know before we do this. What? Your father wasn't the only Buffalo soldier who discovered Whitfield's conspiracy. There were others, good men who tried to do the right thing. What happened to them? They died, all of them. Accidents, fever, Apache raids. But too many coincidences for any thinking person to ignore. The revelation hit Zara May like a physical blow. Her father hadn't just stumbled onto evidence of corruption. He'd been part of a systematic effort to expose it, and he'd died for his courage. How many knew? At least a dozen, maybe more. Your father was the last one alive when he wrote that letter. And now I'm the last one alive who knows the truth. Which is why tomorrow matters so much. If we fail, if you die, then all those good men died for nothing. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a burial shroud. She was carrying the hopes of her dead father, the lives of captured friends, and the survival of 2 entire peoples, all balanced on the slim hope that truth could triumph over greed. What if nobody listens? Then we make sure they remember. Even if they don't believe us, they'll remember what we said. And someday, when more evidence comes to light, they'll know we were telling the truth. That's not much comfort. Sometimes that's all we get. The knowledge that we spoke truth to power, even when power refused to listen. Night fell over the canyon like a closing fist. The cave dwellers prepared for what might be their final journey. Weapons were cleaned and checked. Prayers were offered to gods both Christian and traditional. Children were held close and told stories that might be the last they would ever hear. Zara May sat apart from the others, reading through the letter one final time. Her mother's careful handwriting seemed to glow in the firelight, each word a small act of defiance against the forces that had tried to silence the truth. "Are you ready?" Nadua asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." That's all courage ever is. Going anyway when you're not ready. What if I fail? Then you'll fail trying to do the right thing. That's more than most people can say. The small group mounted their horses as the moon reached its zenith. 5 Apache warriors, 3 Comanche. 1 elderly woman who had lived through 3 wars, and a 12-year-old black girl who carried the weight of justice in a leather satchel. They rode toward town knowing that by morning, either the truth would be free or they would all be dead. Sometimes that was the only choice history offered. The lights of the settlement glowed in the distance, warm and welcoming. But behind those lights waited men who had already decided that some truths were too dangerous to survive. The town square blazed with torchlight and celebration. Winter solstice had drawn settlers from 3 counties, their faces bright with whiskey and the promise of frontier justice. A wooden platform stood at the center, decorated with bunting and military flags. 5 nooses swayed in the evening breeze. Zara May moved through the crowd with careful steps, her clean dress and neat braids making her invisible among the other children. The leather satchel hung beneath her coat, its weight both burden and hope. Around the square's edges, Mangas and his warriors waited in the shadows, their faces darkened with ash and determination. Major Whitfield stood on the platform beside the territorial governor, his uniform pressed and his boots polished to mirror brightness. He spoke to the crowd with the practiced ease of a man who had learned to sell death as patriotism. "These savages attacked innocent families," he declared. "They murdered women and children. They burned wagons and stole livestock. But tonight, justice will be served." The crowd roared its approval. Zara May felt sick at the sound. These people had no idea they were celebrating a lie. The prisoners were brought forward in chains. Tashawika walked with his head high, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found her. The brief moment of recognition passed between them before he looked away, protecting her with his silence. Katsuteka limped beside him, his face swollen from interrogation. The other captured warriors bore similar marks of torture, but their dignity remained unbroken. They would die as they had lived, with courage intact. "Before we proceed with the execution," the governor announced, "Major Whitfield has asked to present evidence of these criminals' guilt. Evidence they confessed to themselves," Whitfield added with a smile that never reached his eyes. The major pulled out a sheet of paper covered with crude X marks. Each prisoner has signed a full confession, admitting to the massacre of the Johnson wagon train and the Murphy family. Zara May's blood ran cold. She had traveled with the Johnson family. They had been kind to her, sharing their food and treating her like one of their own children. To hear their deaths used as propaganda for their killer's benefit was more than she could bear. She stepped forward from the crowd. That's a lie. The words cut through the celebration like a blade. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The entire square focused on the small girl who had dared to challenge the authorities. "Who said that?" Whitfield demanded. "I did." Zara May walked toward the platform, her voice growing stronger with each step. "And I can prove it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A black girl challenging a white major was unprecedented, dangerous. Some faces showed curiosity, others anger. All showed surprise. "You're the girl from the wagon train," Whitfield said, his voice carefully controlled. "The sole survivor of the Indian attack. I'm the sole survivor of your attack." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Whitfield's face flushed red, but he maintained his composure. Too many witnesses to lose control now. "You're traumatized, child. These savages have filled your head with lies. The only lies here are yours, Major." Zara May pulled out the letter, holding it high where everyone could see. "This is evidence of your crimes. Written by my father, Sergeant Thomas Washington of the 10th Cavalry. He discovered your conspiracy before you had him killed." The crowd's murmur became a roar. Buffalo soldiers were respected throughout the territory, their courage unquestioned even by those who questioned their humanity. To accuse a major of murdering one was either madness or truth. "That's preposterous," Whitfield sputtered. "Your father died of fever." "My father died because he learned you were selling army weapons to Apache raiders, using them to attack wagon trains, then blaming the Comanche for the raids." Lies and fantasies. Bank records, witness testimony, names, dates, and amounts. Zara May's voice carried across the square with mathematical precision. "Everything you've done is documented in this letter." The territorial governor stepped forward, his face troubled. "Let me see this document." "No." Whitfield's hand moved to his sidearm. "This is obviously forged. The word of a traumatized child against a decorated officer." "Then you won't mind." "If the governor examines it, I mind very much. This is a military matter, not a civil one." The distinction was crucial. Military justice happened behind closed doors, controlled by men like Whitfield. Civil justice happened in public, with witnesses and documentation. "The murder of civilians is always a civil matter," the governor said firmly. "Give me the letter." Whitfield's hesitation lasted only seconds, but it was enough. The crowd sensed the shift in power, the moment when authority revealed its uncertainty. "The letter is evidence of an ongoing investigation," Whitfield said finally. "It cannot be shared with unauthorized personnel. I am the territorial governor. I authorize myself." Zara May stepped onto the platform, her small frame dwarfed by the men around her. But her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Major Whitfield has been stealing from the army, murdering soldiers, and framing innocent people for his crimes. He's not a hero. He's a thief and a killer." "Arrest her," Whitfield ordered his men. But his men hesitated. The crowd had grown restless, sensing something rotten beneath the pageantry. Newspaper reporters scribbled frantically, their stories already writing themselves. "On what charge?" the governor asked. "Treason, sedition, interfering with military." "Justice. She's 12 years old. Age doesn't excuse treason." The moral bankruptcy of the statement hung in the air. A decorated officer threatening to hang a child for telling the truth. The crowd's murmur became a growl. Mangas chose that moment to step from the shadows. His warriors followed, not as attackers but as witnesses. Their presence changed the dynamic completely. "We come in peace," Mangas announced. "We come to speak truth." "More lies," Whitfield snarled. "More savage propaganda." "We have evidence," Mangas continued. "Proof that Major Whitfield has been arming our enemies and blaming U.S. for their crimes. He produced the fake Apache arrows, the torn army uniforms, the intercepted messages. Each piece of evidence built upon the last, creating a wall of truth that even Whitfield's authority couldn't scale." "This is a conspiracy," Whitfield declared. "Savages and their sympathizers trying to undermine American justice." "Then let's examine the evidence," the governor said. "Publicly, in front of witnesses. I refuse to participate in this farce." "Then you can explain your refusal to the federal marshals." The words were a death sentence for Whitfield's career. Federal marshals answered to Washington, not to territorial commanders. They investigated corruption wherever they found it, regardless of rank or reputation. "You're making a mistake," Whitfield said quietly. "These people are the enemy. They've killed settlers, burned farms, terrorized families." "No," Zara May said firmly. "You've done those things. You've killed, burned, and terrorized. You've just blamed others for your crimes." The word of a child against a decorated officer. The word of a child supported by documented evidence. The governor took the letter from Zara May's hands, unfolding it carefully. He read silently, his face growing paler with each line. When he finished, he looked up at Whitfield with something approaching disgust. "This is detailed, specific, damning. It's also forged. Then you won't mind if we verify the bank records it mentions, or interview the soldiers it names as witnesses." Whitfield's silence was answer enough. The crowd sensed the shift, the moment when power revealed its corruption. Their celebration turned to something uglier, more dangerous. "Release the prisoners," the governor ordered. "I refuse." "Then you'll be joining them in chains." The federal marshals stepped forward, their badges gleaming in the torchlight. They had been watching from the crowd, waiting for this moment. Justice moved slowly, but it moved. Whitfield's hand moved to his gun, but it never cleared leather. Too many witnesses, too many consequences. His conspiracy had depended on darkness and deception. In the light of public scrutiny, it crumbled like autumn leaves. The prisoners were freed amid cheers from the crowd. Tashawika embraced Zara May briefly, his relief evident in the strength of his grip. Katsoteka nodded his respect, his earlier suspicions forgotten in the face of her courage. "What happens now?" Zara May asked the governor. "Now we investigate, we document. We make sure this never happens again." "And the tribes?" "They'll receive federal protection and compensation for the injustices done to them." It wasn't perfect justice, but it was justice. The truth had been spoken, heard, and accepted. The conspiracy had been exposed, its architects arrested, its victims vindicated. 6 months later, Zara May stood in front of a one-room schoolhouse, teaching reading to children from 3 different communities. Comanche, Apache, and settler children sat side by side, learning that knowledge belonged to everyone who sought it. Tashawika served as tribal liaison, helping negotiate the new treaties that would protect his people's rights. The rope that had nearly killed Zara May had been transformed into the schoolhouse bell rope, its daily ringing a reminder that instruments of hate could become tools of hope. The letter that had cost so many lives was preserved in the territorial archives, its truths available to anyone who sought them. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the foundation had been laid for a future where truth mattered more than prejudice. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.